Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus. Uh, a little bit about myself. I've been traveling around the world, chasing after the dream, right? I've worked in all the different aspects of 3D, as film, commercials, TV, uh, games, mobile games, and even VR. So a lot of what I've done kind of flows in and out, and I all the different industries because they all have different workflows and pipelines, and so it's very interesting to have learned and have been very lucky to have learned all the different pipelines and workflows and moved around the world. And currently, at I'm a modeler at the newly introduced Netflix Animation Studios, and yeah, and we're working on some projects right now. So that's what I've been up to. Um, I can share a few things that I've done over the years. So yeah, generally in this class, what we'll be doing is we'll be learning modeling, some anatomy, doing some character work, some texturing, rigging, and then finally in our last term, we'll be doing a bit of portfolio work. And that's mainly for a collection of trying to get all your 3 terms work put together, and then we'll then try to best represent who you are at the end of the 4 terms. So I think that's pretty good for the 4th term. We would actually have that. Um, so yeah, these are some of the works I've done over the years. Um, some are games, some are film.
Marcus, did you click on share
Yes.
yet? It's
Oh, sorry.
up at the top.
Yes, my bad. I've been scrolling through some works and sorry about that. Yes, thanks for the reminder. Um, yeah, so these are some of the works that I've done over the years. Some of these are character work, some environment work. This project was done in Blender. Um, so I'm constantly trying to also push myself, trying to learn what's the latest things and latest programs out in the industry as well. Yeah, and this one was a project, more of a game project back then. Um, and this was one of the last few projects before LucasArts got shut down. And this is from Spider-Man. And this was also this was an Unreal project um, for Love, Death, Robots. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with. And this was a 3D sculpt of Jerry, Tom and Jerry, a pitch for Tom and Jerry the movie. I think largely also what I would love to show is a collection of what the students in the past have done, because I think that's a lot more helpful to know what the students pick up from this school. So sorry. So here we have Sarah's work. Um, this is based off a coffee machine. Um, it's some hard surface work that we have done. So you can see, sorry for the background. Um, you can see that we focus on topology, and I think that's something very important, still relevant today. And this is Oscar's work. Oscar was a very, very strong generalist, and you can see he not only focused on modeling, he also focused on lighting. And hopefully, what I love to do in the school is to actually push the students to do their very best. And through each class, what we do is we also give feedback to try and get your work closer and closer towards the concept art. And this is his final work, and I think it's really, really strong. So and then here we have Jake's house. Yeah, it's a stylized house, and he was his. I can remember Jake. He was one of my very first students, and yeah, I really enjoyed teaching and working with him. Next we have Greg's. Greg was more of a organic creature person, so we went more towards the direction of creature for his fourth term. Yeah, as you can see, his work is just like top notch on creature work. So here's a pig. This one's a dinosaur, and then this one's more of like a game creature. And here's Adrian. Although this lightsaber might seem quite basic, it actually trips up a lot of the students when you're doing hard surface work, because whenever it's anything that's cylindrical or circular, whenever there's a curvature to it, it starts to get really, really difficult to try and maintain these shapes while preventing artifacting and pinches throughout the model. And so I think this was one of the very first few terms earlier in his 4-term experience here. He did this very early on, and this is what I love to do also, is to push students to try and challenge themselves. So yeah, and of course he was a Star Wars fan, so you can see his hard surface work is just top notch. It's just really clean. So yeah, that's just a bit of some of the students' works that I have to share. Yeah. Is there any questions?
Marcus, before we get to
yeah.
questions, can you go over
Sorry.
how's the school set up? How long is the course? How many terms?
So throughout the 4 terms, this is a 4-term course, and the first term, what we do generally is we do modeling. We learn basic modeling, and a lot of things might seem basic, but that's a lot of the things that I think will cover you foundation-wise, that will put you throughout, not just in school, but things I see in the industry as well. So that's one of the big things we do. And then in the second term, what we do is we start to do anatomy. In anatomy, and it's a very progressive thing. So what we do for anatomy is we do body parts instead of the full character, so that we don't scare people, right? So we do body parts, and while we do body parts for the anatomy, we also do a bit of hard surface. So what we do at the same, it's pretty intense. So in the second term, we do exterior modeling and then some interior modeling. So the anatomy and the architecture, exterior and interior, will happen at the same time. So that will get you exposed a bit of that, just touching a bit of that here and there. And then in the third term, this is when we go up a notch. This is the part where we talk about the comparative anatomy. We build upon the anatomy that we have learned on from second term, and we'll then do animal anatomy. So we work on primates, and then you can see, because the main reason why is primates are actually related to humans, right? That's the closest anatomy that we have. So we move on to primates, and then quadrupeds. So it's very progressive. And then we'll do some scale work as well for reptiles and amphibians. And then in our fourth term, what we do is we'll look at what you've done in the first 3 terms, right? And we'll see, okay, so what is it, what best represents who you are? And is there anything we like to do more to fill in the gaps to make your portfolio a more vibrant or focused demo reel, whichever company or direction that you like to go towards. So that's the fourth term. That's what we always do. Yeah. Is there any clarification on anything that I've mentioned so far? Any questions? Anything gray?
Students
Concerns?
can type their questions into either the chat or the Q&A.
Cool. Just, yeah, go ahead.
Do you see that? Can you read it in the chat?
Q&A.
Up at the top, just click on chat, and Erica's asking, what is the difference between organic modeling and inorganic modeling?
This is an interesting question. So very crudely, very generously, very at a high level, organic and inorganic is generally, I would actually use the movie Pacific Rim as a good example, where organic, it refers to more of the creatures, and inorganic more towards the robots, machines. So generally, we actually have organic referring to creatures, trees, plant life, and then inorganic for anything like, for example, this coffee machine, anything that is lifeless, and but however, there is a gray area. There is a gray area where visually, in terms of concept design and concept art, you can actually have robots that look very organic and the designs flow in and out, right? And so that can also be considered organic hard surface designs. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. So to some extent, with these flowing curves in this coffee machine, we can kind of see that comparatively or relative to other designs, this is considered organic, right? Because they flow instead of something that's very primitive looking, very angular. But of course, you can also say it's arguable that this machine, this hard surface coffee machine or coffee press, is actually less organic to something that is more organic than this. So everything is very, very, very relative to each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, somebody's asking, what is texture mapping?
So, for example, let's try and see if there are any other examples that we can see. Okay, so texture mapping, what it is on our models themselves, we, for example, the screen here, right? The computer, the program doesn't know how or where to assign this image to that part of the model. And so this is where we have to create UVs, and I'll explain a bit on why it's called UVs. So we basically have to create that on the model and assign that part of the model to the texture. And that's why it's called texture mapping. And we call it UV because we know in 3D space X, Y, and Z as the 3D space, right? And so U and V is a different space on the letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and U, V is basically a different space, a different 2D space that I guess the original 3D people actually came up with. So it's a different space compared to the 3D space, and they assigned this 2D space to the 3D space. Yeah. And so that's why we call it mapping. We're mapping a part of the 3D to the 2D image, right?
Good. For the students, what are their software? What kind of software are they using?
Generally we would use Maya and Substance Painter, and ZBrush for sculpting. If, however, you would prefer to use Blender or 3D Studio Max, which other students have done so as well, that is good too as well, because the concepts are transferable. We don't necessarily teach programs. It's just the techniques, the ideas, and I think those are much stronger, because when we go out into the industry, it's not necessarily program based, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend certain hardware considerations?
Certain
Whether it's a lap.
hardware, yeah. Actually, okay, so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I so I've actually worked freelance for a bit on a laptop as well. I think today actually a lot of the hardware that's out there that we can get, maybe even 5 years old hardware, is enough to do what we want to do. But however, if we were to just do basic modeling, one-off models, that's enough. But when we want to go up to the next level, when we are doing lighting, rendering, texturing, this is when your computer can feel a bit sluggish and the results will get a bit slower. But on the modeling side, if you have a COM or laptop that's 5 years old, that's more than enough. It's enough for today. But when we go to lighting, like I mentioned, lighting and rendering, it just takes a longer time to render and output those images.
Somebody's asking if a portfolio is required. For this course, yes. At the school, we like to see that students that are interested in learning digital arts had some prior interest or training in arts, whether it's sculpting, drawing, painting. It can be digital as well. Next question, what kind of careers do you get when you study 3D modeling?
Now I'm just gonna mention a few from my own experience, and so it's mainly being a modeler, right? And you get to work in mobile games, um, game consoles, games, commercial work, advertising, VR, film. Film, by film I mean VFX and also animation, and feature animation as well. So those are the areas that you can work in, but for modeling, there's actually more than that. You can go into architecture, and any other industry that involves and requires any form of 3D. I've seen, so for example, companies like Apple and even Meta/Facebook, they also do a bit of 3D. So they also have jobs for 3D stuff as well. And then not to forget, there's architecture and medical field, where they do a lot of these modeling for heart, the organs, And then you have like blood cells or anything that, that represents what they actually have to share, right? So it's pretty vast. Anything that requires some form of visualization in 3D will offer some form of modeling job. Yeah.
Okay, next question's asking, how do you master topography? Polygons, UVs, meshes, textures.
A lot of practice, a lot of practice. I say that because I think there is in all forms of jobs or fields that you do, for example, when we're trying to figure out something, it's all about try and error, making mistakes and learning from them. So when you talk about trying to figure out what topology is, what is the best topology that could be? For example, this is more of like a basic foot, leg, sock topology that we can create from. Here we can do more of this L-shaped topology, and we can also do this, right? So what's the difference between these two? Is there an answer? Is there a right answer to good topology? Now that's the tough part, because there have been instances where this is more required, and there have been other instances where this is more required. So the better answer to give you is not necessarily which is the better topology, but what is the best topology that contributes or supports what the work has to be done here, right? So, yeah. So it's more so experience, yeah.
Is it common in the industry to use preset sculpting tools?
Preset sculpting tools. Or could I clarify the question? What does preset mean here?
Ones that would already be built into the software, I would imagine.
Right. So in most softwares like ZBrush and even Maya, there's a set of sculpting tools here. And although there's a range of the tools here, we generally use just a number of tools. So generally one would be a general sculpting tool. So I'm just going to subdivide this so the mesh can be high enough to actually sculpt on. So we go into the sculpt tool and you can see a range of brushes. So we generally have one type of more of a sculpt brush. I'm just controlling the intensity here. So we can have some form of sculpt brush, and then we can have a pinch, right? We need to pinch up some areas, and then bulge. To bulge out some other areas. And then, yeah, those are the more common brushes, and not to forget our favorite grab brush or some form of move brush that we like to actually very quickly move the model in terms of silhouette. So as we are working, sometimes we always like to focus on strong silhouettes, and clean silhouettes as well. So yeah.
When will a studio use pre-made assets versus an in-house modeler? Can you give an example of that?
Actually, most of the times. But I think that question is kind of tricky, where when do you just buy off a model, let's say from TurboSquid, versus having a modeler work on it. So it's all down to cost, right? Is it cheaper to just buy a model off online, right? Or pay the modeler based on the modeler's hourly rate or day rate, right? So that's the comparison that the studio have to actually compare. Now, most of the things, most of the designs, most of the 3D model are designed specifically for the movie. So you generally aren't able to just buy off that specific design for that movie. So that's why, or that's when we would actually have someone work on that asset, right? Um, yeah.
Okay, someone's asking, how do you stand out as a modeler?
That is a tough question. But I'm just gonna say this, and it is difficult. I say it's difficult. Okay, I'll just say this. A modeler would stand out when that person's work stands out from the rest of everyone else. That's a very crude, basic statement that it's easy to say but difficult to achieve. Now, how do you stand out? How does that portfolio stand out from the rest when you look at it immediately? Of course, it has to be the best, right? But how it can stand out is when it's very personal. When I see that portfolio and it says something, it screams something because it's all that individuals' artistic choices made throughout the projects. Um, there's a common thread going on. So it's not, that's why it pains me to hear students or, you know, go tell me that they go to one of these job fairs and they talk to the recruiters and then the recruiters tell them, oh, they need this, because that's what we all need, right? And that to me is quite sad because it creates a very mechanical um, requirement to the students, and then word spreads around that this is what we need to get a job. And to me, it's sad because if everybody has, let's say, the requirements are okay, we need something, we need a creature, a character, a creature, we need a car, a hard surface, um, um, an old lady of sorts, and you know, so you can see they're very far. There's no general common thread between what I've just mentioned. And what happens is your portfolio doesn't scream a story or narrative throughout that person's choices, and then everybody's portfolio is going to look the same. And you might not enjoy that project because you're forced to do it just to please someone else. So for me, a lot of times I would get the student to do what they love. And when you love to do something, that joy and passion while working on it just generally just flows into it. And then your ultimate project would just look powerful, strong, and beautiful because it all come from within. I know it sounds a bit cookie and unstructured, but I really believe in that. And
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, final question from this student is, I think they're talking about creativity.
Hmm.
What is a modeler's take as an artist? If you model something compared to replicating, I think they're talking about another artist's drawings.
Yes. Uh, it is it is something that 3D artists actually struggle, and sometimes even, or most of the times, we don't even get a concept art. We get an image of a tree, and they say, "Okay, model that tree," right? And you go, "Okay, it's dead." But actually, there are pockets of creativity. There are avenues of you as the artist being able to put in some input as well. There are pockets in there. And the more you do that, and I say all this because there's some studios I've been to, and what we do is just we just put the image there and we just follow the lines and just copy it and make sure when we flip back and forth the image to the model, it's 1, 1, right? It's exact. But many a times that does not, it's funny because many lines contribute to the final art piece, right? And if those lines are dead, are stiff, the final work will actually look stiff and dead. So what do I mean by that, right? So here, I'm going to have two models. I'm just going to bevel it. One real tight, and then one a bit of a different value, a bit higher, let's say even at this level. We can see that although maybe, we match the concept art, the general silhouette is there. There's this L shape of a model, of a design. But we can see there are almost two different designs for two different style of the show. One would be more for mechanical, stiff work, whereas this one feels a bit more bubbly and a bit more alive, right? So there are avenues, for example, even gonna just quickly do this and just move some areas of the model as well. Now, this is also dependent on the show. Don't go around just, just touching and moving a bit of your model around like that. It really depends on the style. And you can see, if I were to just even put this next to this, right? We can see that out of feeling, right? We can see that this one feels a bit more used, aged, alive compared to this, right? So there are ways for you as an artist to still make those artistic choices along the way, even though it's an image that you have to follow. In addition, sometimes what we get is just an image, and you as the artist will have to go out there and do more research and look up more images to support your work and strengthen it. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what we do as artists or mainly artists at the studio, is to actually ground our work. When we ground our work with more designs and observations that we can find, our work becomes stronger. It's not a design from our heads, it's a design that feels believable, right? And that's what we can do as 3D artists. So I hope you don't feel stifled and that this industry is just about following and the lines and keeping in line with things.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question, I believe what they're asking is, how do you model hands and noses? I mean, do we have 2 weeks to cover that?
In this school, we don't really talk about topology per se, and that's what made me kind of annoyed actually when I was in school myself, or even on some projects, that we don't exactly have that there is no standard that everyone is learning the same thing at the same time. That was something quite annoying to me because coming from Singapore, everything is perfect, right? Everyone learns the same thing. So when I go to school, I pay to go to school. I know that I'm learning the same thing as someone else. I know, all that. It's great. It's perfect. But then when I was starting to learn about animation and all this, everyone's learning is different. And so the thing about it is that as tough it is in order to learn as much as we can, we need to fail fast and fail early. what does that mean? It means we need to dabble as much as we can on different things, like what we talk about topology and all that. We need to try different things. We need to learn as much and do as much, and that's the best way to learn working in this industry, to get that kind of exposure. Now, what other ways, for example, to learn about like hand topology or or nose topology? So we all know in order to be an artist, right? In the times of Michelangelo, the great sculptors, we always have, you have the main artist, but then below the artist, you have the artisan, right? The 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 artisan is basically someone who is copying the main artist. You're doing copies, right? So that's how we learn is today we just look at topology out there and we just copy it, right? But that's the baseline. You want to start by just copying. And through copying, you start to learn things, right? And that's where the next level, you need to start thinking. You need to start thinking why are things done this way? Why are topology done this way, right? For example, you can go online and you can find topologies of knees and you go, why is topology done this way, right? So you have to start thinking yourself as you go along. So for example, a lot of the topologies that we see out there are something like this. But we don't exactly think why, right? And it's only for me, after I did this simple test of having a bent leg and then smoothing it and getting to the shape that we want, that I learned why most of the topologies are like this. So now a lot of topology then is then supported by two things. One is by the surfacing side, and the other is the deformation side. Largely deformation, rigging, movement, what the character needs to do. So many times what you see and what you find out there is topology of the knee to look like this. And as mentioned before, what happens is every design is unique. Every design is very subservient to the performance of the character, the deformation, and of course the design. So it's difficult to just say, hey, this is the be all and all for the knee topology, the finger joint topology for everything. No, it's not. It's very dependent on what the project calls for it, right? So that answer to that perfect hand topology, is there one perfect hand topology out there? No, there isn't. So the only way is to practice a lot and understand things. Right?
Okay, would you recommend learning to sculpt with clay?
Yes, definitely. I would.
Why?
One of the few reasons is because clay is an additive process, right? In order to make the clay look good, I cannot press 3 to make it look smooth. The clay will look like a blob if I don't move it, I don't force it, I don't shape it. And for me, largely to work with traditional stuff, is a mindset. It's a mindset that will get you to think that in order to make art look good, you have to put your hand to it. You have to make those decisions. with 3D, people can just look and feel lazy because we can very easily copy, we can undo, we can duplicate, we can mirror from right to left and left to right, right? And so your mind takes a lot of things for granted, right? So that's why I think just having like some experience with clay can help with your 3D modeling. But does that mean that you have to go in this order, do the clay, then do the 3D? No. Actually, I have a friend who's really good in 3D, and he applied those skills to be more of a 2D sculptor. So it's kind of like the reverse. But definitely, he did mention before that the 2D sculpting helped his 3D get to the next level.
Somebody's asking, what's the difference between textures and materials?
So it can get pretty gray, but let's just look at textures in a way like textures as if it's just images, right? So just textures can be just images, grayscale images and whatnot, and materials to be like different materials out there. For example, metals, plastics, milk, even liquids, marble, wood, right? Paper. So just think of it as these are general materials. But if we would like to have it designed with images on it, or control it even more, then that's when we would like to have, like, let's say, patterns and grain through the wood. That's when we start to use textures to control them, right? And that's why most texture artists don't really, these days are not called texture artists. They're called surfacers because they're dealing with how a surface look like, right? Whether is it shiny, polished versus something that's matte and flat, right?
Right. Somebody's asking the difference between, these are really different things, texturing and lighting.
Texturing and lighting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like just now why when I described about surfacing, when I use the word surfacing instead of just texturing, because everything kind of goes hand in hand. Do we control the surface with textures and materials, and stuff like that? So I would now use the word surfacing. Now, is surfacing and lighting hand in hand? Yes, it is. Because in order to make a surface stand out, we might actually have to control using a type of lighting, right? And in order to, and vice versa, we would actually have to balance the surfacing with a proper lighting, and even with the lighting, we have to balance with proper shading and texture work. So it goes hand in hand, back and forth. Sometimes in reviews, we might see a model not really good with general flat lighting. Then that's when we actually create more of a contrasty lighting. So we'll have different lighting sets to review the designs as well. So yes, they go hand in hand.
Okay. I'm going to jump down to the bottom because we're getting down to the end of our webinar. And somebody's asking, do you think it's important for a modeler to learn how to do 3D printing?
It really depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to be more of a someone who sells your 3D designs, your sculpts, then yes, you would need to learn 3D printing. But if you're just a 3D modeler, just working in the industry, no, you don't have to learn 3D printing.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Anyone has additional questions or wants to learn more information from us can please contact us at info@vanas.ca. I want to thank everybody for taking time out on their busy weekends. Hope you have a great weekend. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Marcus. Thanks for
Cool.
coming.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a good day.